All right, ni hao. Excuse me, my voice is a little off today. Try to make this through the video all the way. My name is Kevin, and I'm coming to you from maximizingecommerce.com. In case you missed it, I said ni hao there at the beginning, which is actually Chinese for hello. And if you don't know that phrase, or you think I completely butchered it, please leave me a comment down below. Very easily I could have butchered the pronunciation. I'll throw out a couple other Chinese words here and there, so please feel free to correct me. But in this video, the reason I started with ni hao, one of the few Chinese words I know, is because I've got a little experience getting products like this you see here behind me from Chinese suppliers, and I just want to share with you some of what I've learned, because it's actually a lot simpler than a lot of people think to work with Chinese suppliers, and it will help you grow an e-commerce business. So we're going to get right to it. So one of the big things I really want to point out more than anything is that a lot of times people get caught up in, we'll call it the head trash. The worry about, well, you know, do they want to work with me? Am I big enough? Am I going to get taken advantage of? And those are all things that I used to worry about. Now, will I get taken advantage of? Probably is not going to happen. You're going to find when you start working with suppliers, there's going to be some that really their market is the Targets and the Walmarts of the world. And, you know, sometimes they work with smaller suppliers, but it would be, you know, smaller than myself and, you know, most people that are watching this video. They typically don't work with that type of supplier. I mean, they might do like, or buyer, I should say. They might work with somebody who buys like an entire container, like a 40-foot shipping container. There are ones like that, but for every one like that, there's probably 10, 15, 20 other suppliers that will work with you with minimum order quantities on what it is you're looking for. They want to sell to you. They want to work with people in the Western world. So if you're in the Western world, or you're looking to sell to people in the Western world, you definitely are going to be able to find Chinese suppliers to work with you. And in this video, we're also going to talk a little bit more about some tips with working with them that I think will make you a little bit more confident. Because that's one of the things that I struggled with, especially in the beginning, was, you know, are they going to take me seriously? Am I going to get taken advantage of because they're not going to take me seriously? And I really have not had any problems. I've been doing it for about 2 years now. Worked with several different suppliers. Some is knowing pretty quickly, you know, who's good to work with, who's not. But more than anything, the first thing I think you really need to know is the culture. There's a whole different culture and a way of looking at things in China than there are in the Western world. And that's probably pretty obvious. Now, they're probably becoming more westernized as time goes on, and they're seeing the value of working with people. In, you know, the United States, the UK, South America even, pretty much outside of Asia, I'm sure they work with other people in Asia, but they want to work with people outside of Asia because they know that, you know, globally there's all kinds of opportunity. So they're looking to capitalize on that opportunity. And one of the big things in their culture is a concept, which I'm, again, probably going to butcher the term, but it's called guanxi. Which basically is about relationships. It has to do with their network. It's kind of tying in their network, who they know, who's in their circle of influence. And it's a very important thing to them. So sometimes, you know, we talk in like the US a lot of times about like work-life balance, you know, kind of like your personal life and your work life. You know, for them, it all kind of comes together. Which it does here in the U.S. to some degree, but there it's a bigger part of their culture is guanxi. So they're all about long-term relationships. And if you go into it thinking, you know, how can I just make a quick buck off of, you know, getting one shipment, they want to work with someone who's going to at least attempt to work with them in the long haul. So if you're looking at it from the relationship standpoint of, how do I find a supplier that I can work with long-term, that, you know, if I can get the product to sell, that I'll be going back to time and time again. Then if that's the attitude you're going into it with, you're going to attract that back to you with those suppliers, and they're going to catch up on that really quick and think that you're probably a good person to work with. So again, they're all about the long-term relationship, and they're very loyal. Is what I've found. So once you find a good supplier, stick with them because, you know, they want to work with you. Now, one thing I'll notice is or I'll point out very quickly, is you may have noticed I said a couple of Chinese phrases. There are a few words that I've picked up along the way, but by no means do I know Chinese at all. But I've had no problems with communication. If you think about, different people have different jobs in every company. So if you're a Chinese factory or a Chinese supplier, or a sourcing agent, whatever the case is, if your market you're working with are a lot of people in the English-speaking world, well, what are you going to do? You're going to make sure that you have English-speaking people to work with them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, they're going to be able to teach you, honors English or whatever the case is. I don't know where I came up with that example, but bottom line, their English is a whole lot better than your Chinese, unless you happen to be Chinese. So understand that they're going to have somebody that's going to be able to communicate with you. And I'll share a couple little tips, as we talk a little bit more about setting expectations of what it is you're looking for. But they're going to always have somebody who is, who knows Chinese, especially if you go in somewhere like Alibaba. And I get a lot of my suppliers from Alibaba.com, global sources as well. They know that they're marketing to the Western world and to the English-speaking world, especially, and that they're going to make sure that they have people that can communicate in English. A lot of times it's going to be written. So what I would suggest doing is to avoid a lot of the back and forth in emails. What will end up happening is when you're communicating an email, what I find happens a lot of times, I send an email. Like, let's say I get off work, send an email 8, 9 o'clock on the East Coast. A lot of my suppliers in China are 12 hours ahead of me. So if I'm sending it let's say 9 o'clock at night, it's 9 a.m. their time. So they're just getting into work, getting their day going. And I'll typically have a response that evening. So I go off to work, do whatever, because this is a side hustle for me. I'll have that. Now, what I would suggest doing is, if you don't already, on your phone, make sure you have Skype and WhatsApp. They love Skype and they love WhatsApp. And just as a little side note to get some brownie points, what I would do is when you're talking to somebody in China, they're speaking to you in English, and sometimes it's like you might as well be speaking to somebody in the United States, except they just happen to be in Zhang or some city out in China. But what's going to end up happening is, they love it when you show a little bit of effort and in their language and their culture. So sometimes I'll go on Google Translate. Don't do long sentences, because Google Translate, and they know this, it's notoriously bad for losing context, especially with longer phrases. But if you put in thank you, which is 谢谢, it's going to give you the Chinese characters. And if you've never done it before, you actually can just, highlight, copy, paste into WhatsApp or Skype or whatever messaging app you're using, and they'll get that. And that little thing, they'll a lot of times respond back oh, you know Chinese? And I'm like, no, I know Google Translate, and they usually get a little kick out of that. So it's a nice thing that goes a long way. And again, if you don't already have it, get WhatsApp and get Skype. Just because, going back to my example of the email, think about this. If you're going back and forth, you have a question, they have a follow-up question, and you could be looking at weeks just to get some small thing done. Whereas, if you're both awake, and you get a time they're available, and you can catch them on Skype or you can catch them on WhatsApp, you can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and get most of your questions done. And it's a whole lot more productive. I found that a lot of times they don't necessarily want to talk, because a lot of times their English is a lot better, or at least they're more confident in their English with typing than it necessarily, or written English, I should say, than they are with spoken English, which is understandable. It can be a little bit intimidating. So just as you might be intimidated talking to somebody in another country, well, they're doing the same thing. They're talking to somebody who's 12 hours away from them, if you're in the parts of the US, depending on where they're at and where you're at. So, it's one of those things that, again, learn a little bit about them, show a little bit of respect, throw in a couple Chinese characters that you got off Google Translate, and, keep that conversation going back and forth with Skype or WhatsApp. And a lot of times you'll also tell too that you've got a pretty good one when you're doing the back and forth, and you can tell that they're catching what it is you're saying, that you'll know very quickly, okay, this is a good supplier. Then the next thing what I would recommend doing is get a custom email domain. So one thing I do is, like, when I am on Alibaba, let's say I'm looking for French coffee presses, which I don't sell and don't recommend you sell to start off with. But let's say I was looking for French coffee presses. I go on Alibaba, let's say I find like 20 suppliers to do it. And I say, all right, here's my minimum order quantity I'm looking for. I'm in Florida, here's my zip code. In the US, can you quote me what it would cost for this? And with express shipping, which is air shipping, and then sometimes combines by truck when it gets to the United States. So what I would do is, ask them to quote that, and you'll find you'll get more responses if you have a custom domain. So if you think your company is going to be called XYZ Widgets, well, you might as well get the domain anyway. And if you've never done it before, it literally is like 99 cents to get a domain on GoDaddy. You can just Google 99-cent domains GoDaddy. I think you can only use that coupon code once, but either way, even if you had to pay full price, it's like $14.99 for a .com typically. It's worth it. I mean, you're gonna have to invest a little bit of money into this business, but that's one of those that's gonna go a long way. It's just a nice little touch. And then what I would do too is set up, like in GoDaddy, for example, I think it's like $4.99 a month for the base plan for email. Just so you have an email and you can email back and forth, and you can say to them like, okay, so here's my minimum order quantities I want. Please email me if you're interested at this email address. And you're going to get a lot more if it's Johnny at xyzwidgets.com rather than xyzwidgets at gmail.com. Because you can see how it's more professional if you have the domain. So try to get a custom domain, because it's going to go a long way in showing, okay, this is a real company. I mean, you literally just took probably 20 minutes to set it up, buying the domain and setting it up in GoDaddy. It's simple. I mean, it'll walk you right through it. If you have any questions, you can just call GoDaddy. And you don't even have to use GoDaddy. It's just who I've always used before for getting domains. And then what I would also do too is get a logo. And my first logo that I was using when I first started out is not the same logo I use now. And you could just go on Fiverr.com. I think I just found somebody, I like some of their previous work. I paid $5 for a logo, and Fiverr is Fiverr.com. And on Fiverr, I find people to do all kinds of stuff. So I found somebody with good pricing for logos, and I was able to get a logo for $5. I put that in my email signature. So, Kevin at XYZ Widgets, and I had it, in there. So I would definitely recommend getting the custom domain, because again, it just looks better. And if you have a custom email and you can get a signature and it has your logo in the signature, that's even a better step. Now, I would say if you're not really sure how to do all those things, start taking action. At least start with the custom domain and getting the email, because it's going to go a long way. Then what I would do is, when you're starting your own company, you can be whatever you want to be as far as the title. You don't have to be president or founder. In fact, it's probably less, especially in Chinese culture, it's less, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's less of importance, I should say. I was going to say less prestigious. That was the word I was looking for. But it's not as prestigious to have the, founder or president or CEO title. Maybe be like buyer or senior buyer, director of purchasing or something like that. Because, in Chinese culture, it's very hierarchical. It's all about hierarchy. And, typically in a Chinese company, the owner of the company would, if it's a large enough company, would not be going out looking for their suppliers. Because, every company and somewhere in the supply chain has suppliers. So they wouldn't be going out looking. So it would be kind of weird to them that, okay, why is this person, if they're the owner of the company? So I would pick senior buyer. Now, if they ask you directly, I'm a firm believer in don't lie to them. You want to set up, the guanxi, the relationship long term. So you don't want to set up something that's not going to be true. But I would go ahead and, just start with like buyer or something like that as your title. I mean, they don't really care, but it's probably going to stick out more. And maybe it was just all in my head. It was an piece of advice I had heard, and I've never had any problems with it being buyer. In fact, I'm still the buyer. I have many hats, but buyer is one of the hats. So when I'm with Chinese suppliers, my hat is buyer. So then you want to avoid being the president or the founder, or I just said that. So avoid being the president or the founder. Like I said, be buyer. Now, when you're emailing them, you want to be, or in messaging them, be as specific as possible about what it is you want. Now, one thing to understand is that they don't like saying no. And you may think, oh, that's great. They'll just tell me yes and everything. Well, they may tell you yes to what you asked for, but maybe they come around and do something a little different, because the culture is different. In the U.S., we like to, especially in the Western world, and especially in the U.S., we think of ourselves as pretty direct, and negotiations tend to be pretty direct. I want this, I need this. Well, if you do this, I want that. And a lot of times there's a lot of meat in the middle. Like there's a culture, especially in Western cultures, of meat in the middle. And think about this example. When you grew up, you probably heard of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. What is the whole point of the story? It's too hot. It's too cold. Oh, it's just right. The bed's too hard. The bed's too soft. Oh, it's just right. Everything's about like kind of this meeting in the middle. There's all kinds of different stories. And if you really think about our culture here in the West, in the U.S. anyway, is very much about meeting in the middle. If you're buying or selling a house, it seems like, the negotiation comes down to, meeting in the middle. If you're buying a car, they start high and then you start low, and then you got a meeting in the middle. And it's like that with all kinds of different stuff. That's not the way they work. They kind of like come around like the side. It's kind of the way their culture works. So like, just as like I was saying, we work with, or thinking of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, an example of meeting in the middle. Their stories they grow up with are like Sun Tzu's Art of War, which is all about tactics of coming in different directions to fool the enemy, so to speak. Not that you're their enemy, but it's just kind of, and this is explained to me somewhere, and it was a podcast actually about Chinese culture, and that was the way they were explaining it. And I was like, that kind of makes sense. It's just, they have a different way of thinking about things. So if you ask, can you do this? Can you gold plate the French press coffee thing, let's say, the part that's metal, and they say, no, we can't. And you say, but I need it to be at this price. And they say, well, okay, we'll do it. Well, okay, we'll do it sometimes means, yeah, we'll do that, but then maybe the glass will be half as thick, so it'll be thinner, and then they'll make some other cut somewhere. So you always want to come to a resolution of, if they're going to make some sort of concession, they don't just meet in the middle like we're kind of used to here in the West. It might be like, oh, okay, well, but you didn't say anything about this, so we just adjusted this because this is what you said you wanted. And because in their mind, they're doing what you wanted. So that's why you got to be very clear and specific about what it is you're looking for. And sometimes it's probably better to be overly clear, like just put bullet points. I want it to be this. I want it to be this. I want my French press coffee maker to have, brass on the handle or whatever. If you can find out specifications about, let's say it's got chrome, well, look up some things about chrome. What are different quality grades of chrome? So that way you're getting what you want. Because if you just say, I want high quality, they're going to say, all of our stuff is high quality. Here you go. And then it's not at all something you're looking for. So you'll have better results if you give clearer expectations. And also avoid slang and be very succinct. So you're not going to try to win that you're going to become a writer at the New Yorker or some big newspaper or something like that. You're not trying to prove that you can have these long intellectual sentences. You want short and succinct. Now they might be able to read the longer intellectual stuff, but you got to remember you're talking to somebody in a different culture. So the longer it gets, sometimes the more there's context involved in a sentence. So if you can keep things short, subject, verb, object, I need this, and keep the sentences short, the less likely something's going to get lost in translation more than anything. Because you don't want to send all this money off to another country and then what you get back is not what you're hoping for. And generally speaking, they want to do the right thing for you, but the clearer you are, the more likely they're going to get you what you want. Then always think in terms of win-win partnership. Suppliers tend to work with fairly low margins. So you want to think of it as everyone walks away getting a profit. Just as you want to profit when you're selling, you should think they want to profit. Like, you want them to work with you on the next go round. You don't want them to not respond to you because they lost their shirt, trying to make you happy. And going back to what I was saying before with Chinese suppliers, you want to be honest and set up a good relationship with them. More so, I don't think they really care about the title, but what they do care about is, I've heard some advice out there of like, oh yeah, tell them you got this really big company and you're going to order thousands of products. If you don't see yourself legitimately ordering 5,000 products a month, don't tell them you're going to be ordering 2 container loads a month or whatever it is of a product, and say you want a sample order of 100 to get started. Set reasonable expectations of, if this sells and this works, we'll be back and we'll probably have larger orders. But don't set up the expectation of something that you don't think can be delivered. So, if you're looking at a product that's selling, let's say on Amazon, 5 or 6 units a day, that's 150, 200 a month, let's say. You don't want to be telling them you're going to order 5,000 at a time, because that's not worth your while, and it certainly wouldn't be worth their while to think that they're going to get this big order, when chances are you're probably never going to do that. So, but you can say, like, okay, can you work with us on the smaller order on the front end, which a lot of times they will, because just as you're testing them out, they're kind of testing you out to see, do you pay? Are you a pain in the tuchus to work with? So they want to know that you're a good, reputable person. And again, you don't have to have a long reputation in the business world, because right now you're starting in Guangxi with them. So you're starting as part of their circle of influence and someone that they're working with. So you want to make sure, again, it's a win-win that all parties involved work with, and use language like that. We want to find a long-term win-win partnership, and that's something that resonates with them. And don't say it if you don't think that, but even if a product doesn't work out, that's fine. And I think all parties are going to know that. But if you're going into it with the spirit of, I want to find a long-term supplier that I can work with, who's going to do a good job for myself, for my customers. They want to do a good job for you, and they want you to come back and order from them, because that's just their mentality of work together long term. So they're thinking in terms of lifetime value of the customer, and that customer is you. So it's all about, again, thinking long term, so you can find a win-win strategy that works for everybody. Now, what I also recommend is, sometimes it could be hard trying to figure out all the logistics of shipping. International shipping can be kind of a pain. The nice thing is, if you're shipping to the US, or really any market for that is, but the US especially, US is actually pretty easy to import into, versus like some other countries, like they have more like tariffs and value-added taxes that they charge at the border, whereas the US, pretty simple, at least at the time that I'm recording this. So what I would recommend doing is, just to make it easier on yourself, take advantage of the fact, especially if you're importing into the US, that it's simple to do it. Just let them handle it. Just say, all right, so, and I think I mentioned this before, saying that Alibaba, a lot of times what we'll do is pick a bunch of suppliers and say, all right, here's what I need. Can you work with this MOQ? And then can you quote me for shipping to, my town, my zip code in the USA? And they'll know what that means, or they'll go to someone else and say, what does this cost? And they're going to get a whole lot better rates than if you went on like UPS or FedEx, just because they do it all the time. I mean, they're shipping stuff probably out of their factory multiple times a day, whereas, especially if you're first starting out, you might only be ordering stuff once every few months or once every couple months. Hopefully more often than that, because you're selling through a lot of stuff. But more than anything, let them help you with shipping, and they want to help you. I mean, and if you need help with something or you're not sure, you could say, this is a new product for us. You don't have to come out and say, oh my God, I'm so scared. I've never done this before. But you can just say, professionally, like, hey, this is a new product for us. Can you walk me through what has worked, what has not worked? I don't think they're looking to take advantage of you, but you do want to, see where you can get some help here or there, or, say, hey, do you have other options of this? So a lot of times too, like, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. Like if you're on Alibaba and you're looking up and you look up French press coffee maker and you see some there and it's not quite exactly what you're looking for, just message all of them and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Can you do that? Like if they all have chrome and you want brass, or you want plastic instead of glass, or whatever the case is, just ask them. And, some of them will just blow you off. Some of them will come right back and say, no, that's not something we can work with. Some say, no, we can only do that for a higher MOQ, minimum order quantity. And some others will say, yeah, we can do that. In fact, here's some options. In fact, sometimes if you say, do you have a catalog? They'll send you their catalog and you can take a look and see, what's they have available for you. So, hopefully you found this helpful, and, this is something you can take with you. So something you can, apply quickly here. So here's my challenge to you is, if you're thinking about getting started, just go on like GoDaddy, register a domain, get the email up and running, and then within 24 hours, go on Alibaba. They make it very simple. Type in a product that you're looking for and just start asking for quotes. Just start asking for quotes. Start your Guanji right now. Start your circle of influence. Start finding people to work with. Understand they want to work with you. There's plenty of suppliers that will work with you, even if you're not Target or Walmart or Macy's or, some big buyer. You're going to find people to work with you. So again, hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, it would be helpful to me. In return, if you can click the little thumbs up icon, it definitely helps people at Facebook or YouTube, depending on where it is you're watching this, know that this was helpful. And, leave a comment down below. And if you've not already and you're on YouTube, or if you're watching this on Facebook, either way, head on over to YouTube and subscribe to the Maximizing E-commerce channel, so that way we can let you know when we have other great videos like this that hopefully you find helpful in getting you to a point where you can maximize your e-commerce results. So, Cece, thank you for making it all the way to the end. And Zje, I probably totally butchered that again, which is goodbye. So take care. Have a great day.